Yo, what up? Monero Matteo, welcome back. So, I'm kind of in this lounge type mood here tonight. It's late in the evening. Just got a random hankering to do a video. And so, we've got the lumberjack top on, the jammed bottoms, and the spectacles. So, we are mad chilling here. Just going to go through some news items with you guys here. My seat is slowly shrinking. So, we're getting ready for liftoff. I must need a new chair or something. But hope that you guys have been doing well. Thank you guys so much for the kind comments on the last video. Looks like a lot of you guys had been missing the content, and you guys were glad to get some red meat to chew on. It was a 2-hour video. We went through a lot, and I think that you guys really enjoyed it. So I'm glad you did. Thank you for the kind words and the prayers and all the kindness that was sent my way. The love was immense. I love you guys too. It's awesome. So we're just going to continue to lay out the super hyper mega bullish case tonight. And yeah, just go through some news articles. We're going to talk a little bit about Ethereum, which we haven't really talked too much about since we started the channel. It's I haven't really commented too much on it because I just assumed you guys knew that Ethereum was like a globalista coin. Just like Ripple, right? Like I've never talked about Ripple here on the channel. Because what's the point? You guys know it's a bankster coin. I know it's a bankster coin. Do I need to be out here telling you guys it's a bankster coin and to avoid it? And well, you know, if you want to make tendies, go for it. But you know, we're trying to solve problems here. We're trying to build parallel economies. We're not doing that with Ripple, and we're certainly not doing that with Ethereum. That's ridiculous, right? So, yeah, Monero is the best for doing that. That's why we've been talking about it. Let's go adoption, right? Let's keep it going. And by the way, when I talk about the super hyper mega bullish case, I want you guys to understand it's not just about tendies. As I've said here, you know, freedom before gains. It's important that we really try to build up a system that's outside of the current system. And we do sort of like an Operation Exodus, right? Where we're able to sustain outside of a system which is becoming ever more malevolent, malicious, and parasitical. And Monero is something that could allow us to do that. And one thing that we're going to talk about here in regards to Ethereum and the news that's been circulating around it, because people are worried about OFAC censorship, something that we've talked about here for quite a while in regards to Bitcoin, not so much Ethereum. Ethereum, it was easier to predict because you had proof of stake coming, and proof of stake makes censorship a lot easier, as the ETH bros are going to admit here. Now, some are going to say, well, we could do like a soft fork and we could bleed out the federations which are trying to censor transactions, but that adds major complexity, right? There's going to be collateral damage. Maybe you're just some innocent staker who doesn't want to put your signature on validating sanctioned transactions or blacklisted transactions, right? And then you get caught up in, you know, the blacklist for the Ethereum community. They saw a fork, and then they want to bleed you out of your stake. So the whole thing's just getting complicated. It's really validating our position that you want privacy on the base layer. And we're just going to see how Monero, being private on the base layer, doesn't really allow a possibility for censorship to take place in the first place, and why it is that it's just so much easier to use Monero and be involved with Monero. Like, you don't have to worry about politics within communities and you know, regulatory initiatives to blacklist transactions and addresses. I mean, it's just literally digital money. It's easy. Like, snap your fingers, let's transact. I don't know who you are. I don't care. Here's my address. Let's get going. Let's have a good time. And the ETH bros and the Bitcoin bros are increasingly sweating about their positions. Are we sweating about anything? No, we're taking it easy. We're lounging, right? And what we've seen over the last year is a consistent sense of panic on the behalf of the crypto bros. It kind of inspires within you a sense of schadenfreude, because if you're a Monero bro and you're looking at all these initiatives with, you know, unrealized capital gains tax, and I always tell you guys pay your taxes, but, you know, if always pay your taxes, right? But, you know, it's going to be something which is valuable for Monero. It's not a problem for us, right? If anything, it's bullish. That's what I'm trying to say, because you're going to have a lot of people not really in tune with that. Anyways, but, you know, you look at the regulatory initiatives, you look at People worried about what's happening with this Tornado Cash bro, this developer, which also can translate a little bit to Monero bros who haven't been so private. But a lot of the people who develop on Monero are private because, again, they've seen this coming. They're not really sweating. We're just chilling. We're taking it easy. There's nothing that's worried us. And part of that also is, we've got Christ, we've got faith. And even if they ban Monero, even if we get into a situation where like the electricity grid and the internet goes down, which is totally a possibility now. I mean, things are getting bad out there, especially if you're in Europe. God bless you. But no, we don't have anything to really worry about here. It's just going along as we anticipated and as we planned. So, with that being said, let's just get into the content. Let's see what's going on. I'm still trying to figure out how to... Yeah, this is messed up. Give me a second here. Okay, first story of the evening from Watcher.guru. He says, just in, Dutch agency that arrested Tornado Cash developer says creating a tool for the sole purpose of committing criminal acts may be punishable. So yeah, that guy got arrested. This developer on Tornado Cash got arrested after they had determined Tornado Cash to be illegal to use. They sanctioned it. Anyone who uses it, they're committing violations of OFAC, etc. Right? So it's almost like they arrested this guy for committing illegal acts which weren't made illegal yet retroactively. That's what I'm seeing here. Now, maybe he's going to get off because of that, but that's not a good sign. It's not a good sign. They're starting to arrest people for working on code. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. But like I told you guys in the last video, when people were complaining about Tornado Cash being sanctioned, they're like, what about the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment? Guys, like, that's not the world you're in. You're in, like, an international, global, totalitarian, AI-infused, third world banana republic. That's where you're at. And it's going that way full speed. And you just got to anticipate that anything which helps people become more private, more sovereign, more independent of the system is going to be that which is either suppressed or made illegal or cracked down on. We have to anticipate this. And that's why we need to try to create these parallel systems as quickly as possible, because as this tyranny comes, it's going to get that much more difficult to build these systems, especially when stuff like this is happening. If you get some momentum going in a parallel system, then it's going to be harder for them to crack down on. You're going to have more options, and there's not going to be the likelihood that you're going to end up like this guy as much as it otherwise would be, right? So that's why we're just trying to get people to build parallel economies with this stuff. But frankly, with stuff like this happening and stuff like we're about to get used to, it's a shocker for me to some degree to see Monero just kind of still where it's at in the rankings. I think it's like ranked 28 still. Now, we've been moving up slowly but surely against Bitcoin. There is something going on because I'm seeing more and more people comment on Monero on Twitter. There are a lot more Monero bros out there making a name for themselves, which is fantastic. I see them like consistently popping up, and that's inspiring. That's great. The conversations are moving forward. And then I'm seeing it on the Zero Hedge forums, believe it or not. Firstly, there was a guy who writes for Zero Hedge. You can actually find him on Twitter. I think he just goes by like Zero Hedge Bro or something like that. He's got like a little gear in his name. But he was talking about Monero recently too, because he was like, hey, this whole thing going on with Tornado Cash, this doesn't really seem to be a problem for Monero because it's private on the first layer, which means it's not going to be looked at as a tool. Well, I don't know if he got into that level of analysis, but that's where he was going. I mean, he was like, yeah, this doesn't seem to be a problem for Monero because it's private on the base layer. So it's more likely to be considered an asset rather than a tool, which encourages people to, use it for criminal activity, right? So we're seeing him talk about it, which is great. But also, I was reading an article this morning on the censorship threat of Ethereum, which was posted on Zero Hedge. And in the comments, people were saying, yeah, this is why Monero is here. Maybe we should start to use Monero more. which I'd never seen in the Zero Hedge comments. I mean, typically people are hating on crypto for the most part, but these people were getting some love. These people talking about Monero. We're going to see more of that, okay? I saw Lynn Alden talking about Monero. I've seen other prominent figures in the crypto sphere talking more about Monero. It's happening. The transition's happening. It's just happening slower than I thought, frankly. I mean, how much more do we need to see? I mean, they must not watch this channel, and they just may not be tuned in to literally everything that plays into the super hyper mega bullish thesis that we have, which really pieces hundreds of variable points together and really makes this stuff make sense. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming, but again, you can't really blame people for their ignorance of this stuff. There's just a lot of people who don't know what's up. And that's why we're here. So, moving on, let's get to talking a little bit about Ethereum, okay? So, he's commenting on OFAC compliance. He says, if you don't think this impacts you, they will... I've been mistaken. He's talking about the Tornado Cash bro getting arrested. He says, if you don't think this impacts you, they will probably come for solo stakers. He's talking about this in relevance to Ethereum, who include transactions they don't approve of next. So, right, if you're a staker, and this is going to lay out some complexity for you moving forward, because as we're going to get to in this video, like, you're going to have people come after you in the Ethereum community. Perhaps they may soft fork and try to bleed you out, apparently, of your staking position to where it's worthless if you censor transactions, which means you're just trying to be somebody who isn't getting arrested, maybe like the Tornado Cash bro, for validating censored transactions or transactions that the government wants you to censor, right? He says, wake up and realize this is just the start unless we push back. Yeah, push back, that's not going to come because you guys want the tendies. The crypto community isn't serious about freedom. You have to understand this. If they were, Monero would be way, way further up in the ranks. But the crypto community is serious about tendies. They're going to trade their freedom for money. We all understand this, don't we? And so we know censorship is coming for Ethereum. When you say push back, good luck. I wish you the best. But let's not be naive, okay? There's censorship coming. If you have a transparent blockchain, even if they don't get to censorship, which I think they will, even for Bitcoin, then the issue then becomes you're using a transparent blockchain. And if they don't censor your transactions, well, they could just censor you. It's the same thing that we talked about with people who are like, oh, well, my crypto isn't confiscatable because they don't know my seed phrase. They can't take it from me. Well, okay, well, they can just take you. If they know you have money, right? Like, say you're in, like, Soviet Russia and, Vlad Bro comes to your door. He's part of the KGB or the NKVD, and he says, give me Bitcoin. What are you going to say? Because he knows you've got the Bitcoin. He's been tracking you off the exchanges. Or maybe he's just linked some things together with, Chainalysis or whatever. Well, what are you going to say? Guess my seed phrase? It's in English, sorry? No. You're going to be conscripted and taken to the gulag. And they're going to beat it out of you, or you're going to trade your Bitcoin for your freedom or something, right? And so with Monero, because of stealth address, you don't have that problem. But what I'm trying to say is, even if you've got a transparent blockchain, you're 90% of the way to censorship and to confiscation. 90% of the way there, because they know that you've got the money and they know what you're doing, and they know even if they can't stop you from doing it on the blockchain, they can stop you in real life because physics still exists. Surprise, surprise. So that's something to consider. That's not something which is being considered, I think, too much as a paradigm, really, yet. But I guess we're just going to have to see more people get arrested, like the Freedom Canadian convoy bros. Just people have a short memory. They just don't kind of put two and two together. But, we'll see what happens. We're chilling. It's okay. Seth for Privacy says, the suspected developer of Tornado Cash has been arrested in the Netherlands. Unclear what for exactly, besides having made money off of unstoppable illicit usage of Tornado Cash. He says it's a horrifying precedent. It's kind of horrifying, I guess, especially working for Samurai, Wasabi, and even Lightning developers and routing node operators potentially. Right, because they're going to consider you maybe at some point to be money transmitters. And so you're going to have to look at all of the money that you've got coming in. And as we've seen um, in Congress, they've been talking about putting in a bill which makes um, exchanges and maybe miners and maybe node operators um, brokerages, essentially. They have to abide by the same rules. They're going to be virtual asset service providers. Now, there was pushback against this. I actually don't know what happened with that. I need to follow up on that. But yeah, it's something which they're thinking about doing. And Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, was pretty gung ho about putting that wordage into place in that legislation. They want to do what they can in order to get as much regulation involved as possible, so that they can selectively go after their enemies, kind of like the IRS does. The thing you got to worry about with the IRS or governments that have too many laws in the books is that they can selectively apply the law, because there was a book written one time, and I think one of the statements in the book was like, your average person in America breaks 3 felonies every day. And I don't know which felonies those would be, but that's what happens when the tax code or the legal code becomes so complicated that people just can't even follow the law anymore. And then the law gets applied selectively to whoever is the enemy of the regime. And so let's say that you are an innocent Bitcoin miner, which, by the way, a lot of what you do is on the grid. It's on the system. You're on the tax grid too, because you are basically running a business. Well, if you say things online maybe they don't like, maybe they're going to go to you and say, hey, you mined a particular transaction back in 2020, which had come from North Korea or whatever. So, stuff like this is worthy to note. And as we're going to see with Lightning Network, because you have a channel open and you're allowing people to use your money, your liquidity, in order to transfer value from point A to point B, you're literally like a money transmitter. And that could be coming in the future, to where you've really got to make sure that value which is passing through your node is by the book. It's legal. And that's going to be hard for people to do. That's going to create barriers of entry, because that's going to create probably a significant cost. And a lot of people are just not going to opt to do that, except for maybe the big exchanges, kind of like what we're going to see with Ethereum and, the centralization of staking. It's already complicated as of now to run a Lightning Network node. It's very complicated, and it requires a certain amount of input costs. But if you've got to watch the transactions coming in, yeah, that's quite a lot to deal with that I don't know people are going to really like to deal with. Anyway, so let's move on. He says the fact that developers now have to seriously consider the risks of contributing to open source privacy preserving projects is a nightmare scenario, and telling about where we're at. Welcome to the adversarial environment some of us have been warning about. Right. Yep. And Seth here is talking about why it's great that Monero has fair issuance, doesn't have a developer tax, things that we talked about with Arctic Mine that make it pretty regulatory resistant. But we're not naive. If Monero really starts to get adopted, they'll probably try to crack down on it. I think most of us recognize that. So let's move on. Kurt, he's a pretty smart guy. Give him a follow. He says, remember all the times I said Lightning Network providers are MSB entities. And MSB, that stands for Money Service Business, as far as I understand. I think somebody down here said it. Yeah, so he says, translation, if you run a large network or a Lightning Network node, many connections / liquidity channels, you will be considered a money service business, right? And will get court orders to block certain transactions as it uses your money in your channels. You will be facilitating money laundering if you don't. Right, and that is kind of in the spirit of what Kurt is saying here. He says the Tornado Cash takedown / arrest indicate that his assumptions were accurate about Lightning Network providers becoming MSB entities. Services like Strike and developers from Blockstream and Lightning Labs could be in real trouble here. Maybe, maybe not. Could be that they're the only ones who are able to comply with such regulations. The marginal node operator. It would be too complicated. You maybe have to hire a lawyer or a tech specialist in order to figure out how to make sure you're running this stuff by the book. Because if you look at who funds Blockstream, they'll figure out a way. Okay, and the people who are kind of behind a lot of the developments in crypto, they've been invested in since the beginning. Legal compliance with blockchain. Like, we'll get to this with the digital currency group later in the video. They're all over legal compliance and regulatory compliance. So I don't think this is going to be too big of an issue. It could be that this was anticipated. But your marginal guy out there is not going to probably have the capacity to comply with this stuff. And if they are, they could get targeted because maybe the wrong transaction goes through their node and they just didn't see it. Boom, you get cracked down on. And this could play into FATF, which comprises like 130 or so jurisdictions across the world. And so the whole international system, could come after you. It may not just be a U.S.-based thing. So stuff to consider. I'm just kind of thinking out loud with you guys. Let me know what you think. This is from Patrick Hansen. He says, in the light of recent Tornado Cash situation, I feel like regulatory risk, especially AML for the Bitcoin Lightning Network, is generally under-discussed. Let's have a closer look. He says, custodial Lightning Network services, Strike, Cash App, etc., will have to comply with FATF travel rule and its EU implementation. This will be hard/tricky to implement for many professional Lightning service providers. Yeah, so it's going to be tricky to implement for professional Lightning service providers. What if you're just a node bro? What if you're just some dude out in the Montana mountains and you're just trying to run a node because you believe in Bitcoin, you believe in the revolution, right? There's no way you're going to be able to do that. So it's just going to centralize the network. Let me know what you think. Am I wrong? Moving on. Also, professional Lightning nodes could be seen as regulated payment services, e.g. payment initiators under EU PSD2 regulation, and this would entail many regulatory requirements, e.g. a potential customer authentication. Right, so I think we've already seen a little bit of this. I'm not an expert on the Lightning Network, but I've seen some people out there raise speculation that there could be whitelists and blacklists for a lot of the main central Lightning Network nodes. And it's only a few nodes that get a lot of the traffic. I think I saw a statistic where it's like, if you shut down 25 nodes on the Lightning Network, like 25 of the bigger ones, you shut down like 75% of the Lightning Network. So you're probably going to have naturally an 80-20 rule play into the development of the Lightning Network, just like you have with anything else, the Pareto principle. And so you're naturally going to have centralization, but this is going to make that centralization kick into a higher gear when you start to have regulatory stuff come into this. And there are other centralizing factors as well with the Lightning Network. Let's not get into all that. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be quite interesting. More generally, assets routed through the Lightning Network and potentially nodes that engage in criminal activities could be seen and flagged as high risk under AML frameworks and very hard to offboard to regulated players like exchanges, like assets that went through mixers. Oh, here we go. Like assets that went through mixers, right? Because that's going to be illegal at some point. The concerns raised here are not yet fully clear as policymakers/supervisors have barely commented on this technically complex topic. Fantastic. Love it. This doesn't apply to pure P2P Lightning payments, but let's be honest, Lightning has a scaling limit for pure P2P usage, and the network benefits heavily from professional, high-liquid, well-connected nodes, businesses, which are going to be regulated entities. Correct. So there's that. Just Monero's better. And we've talked forever about how Monero is already instant fast pretty much because of the zero conf. In most cases, that's okay. But with this new development with Cake Wallet that we talked about in the last video, you're getting a lot of adoption. And a lot of people are using Monero to buy gift cards, which you can spend just about anywhere. Why do you need Lightning? And why do you need all this stuff when you have Monero? And Lightning has KYC for a lot of the custodial Lightning Network services. And so it's complicated, KYC, the privacy, not nearly as good as Monero, and then you're going to have this regulatory censorship compliance stuff coming into the mix. Monero, Lightning Network. Okay, so Monero looks better, right? And this is the promise by the Bitcoin bros that Monero is going to become irrelevant. This is what Lynn Alden said. Some Monero bros were discussing Monero versus Bitcoin with her. She had made the claim that Lightning Network was going to essentially make Monero obsolete. This is where she's at, and this is where a lot of the big Bitcoiners are at. Like, they just think Lightning's going to fix all their problems. It's like the ultimate panacea to the scaling issues, the privacy issues, etc. Okay, we're really starting to recognize it's not the case. Moving on. This is from @Gus or @Gus. He says, Lightning is the ultimate maxi compliance stack. He says the IP of the nodes are public and channel IDs point directly to the on-chain UTXOs used to fund it. And this is talking about the privacy. Probing the network is very cheap due to poor denial of service protection. Spies can wiretap into routes and payments. Nodes can refuse to accept channel opens based on pluggable policies like channel amount, whitelists, and others. Yeah, so he's commenting on the whitelist. The biggest implementation is now pivoting to fiat rails, where tokens like Tether are sent over Lightning, adding a new compliance and censorable layer on top of it. And as we'll see with Ethereum, the destiny of Ethereum is going to largely be in the hands of the dApps, those who are developing on Ethereum and giving value to the Ethereum network. And if those businesses or applications want regulation, well, you're going to get regulation for the Ethereum chain, right? That's just going to be the direction it goes in. Like USDC, very much wanting regulation. And regulation is coming because regulation is coming for stablecoins. And if you've got USDC on Ethereum, and it's a very liquid, very popular crypto, which is on top of Ethereum, you could try to soft fork all that you want, but if they don't want to go along with it, like, people are just going to stay with that, chain. Am I wrong about this? Let me know. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think Ethereum's destiny is now in the hands of essentially the big players who have built on top of it, which are people who are going to want institutional money to move into the space, which means regulation, which means censorship. Seems pretty straightforward to me. He says Lightning with Tor is unreliable. There's no such thing as private channels. Okay, so you guys are kind of seeing this. Oh, by the way, he says use Monero, but you guys already know that. Let's listen to a little bit of some confessions, I guess, taking place by Lightning Network developers. The main points are it does not scale. Lightning is very, very bad, quote unquote. Large payments simply don't work. Too complicated. Liquidity in one direction. Too hard to run a node. A lot of work needing to be done. And they've been working on this for how long? Like 7 years? And it's still essentially like a lab experiment. But with all this stuff going on with regulation, it's about to get that much more complicated and unlikely to deliver the promise of the Bitcoin bros. But let's listen to what these bros have to say. These are people who develop on the Lightning Network. So
the name of today's event is Lightning Limitations, about Lightning's shortcomings so we can address them.
Yeah, Lightning does not scale that far. As liquidity is primarily going in one direction throughout the network, you have people rebalancing by actually going to chain. So we're back to this world where we're talking about compressing transactions to get them on chain. Certainly for larger volume payments, it just doesn't work. So that's the first, just like, we don't know how far it scales. On top of that, there's a million UX issues that still need to be worked through. Lightning UX is great when it works, and when it doesn't, currently users are basically left in the dark. There's still this world where the payment didn't work. Try again, I guess, but you've already been trying for a minute, and we can't find a route or something. But we're not going to try to explain all the complexities. The UX still has a long ways to go.
Lightning is too complicated to impose on end users and make them have to even understand the concept of a channel or, the concept of a liquidity network, etc. We've all been working on Lightning stuff for years now, and it still feels like there's so much work to do.
And the other problem, of course, is UX. It currently is way too hard to run a Lightning node.
The current state of the Lightning network,
and it's about to get a lot harder.
Very
because of the regulations
for privacy. You can discover node balances relatively trivially with probing. We need payments to randomly fail, maybe, to reduce the effect of probing. We may need to charge for upfront fees for payments, which may increase fees across the network, which people don't like. And on top of that, all of these things may or may not work, so we need more academic research to see whether they will work.
Beautiful. Wow. So confident, so awesome. It's just annoying that we've got to put up with this stuff rather than just go to the simple solution, which is Monero. Just why do people have to make things complicated? Monero works right now. It's easy to work. It's easy to use. Plug and play. Let's just use that. But no, let's wait on complicated technologies to come out, which are subpar, so that we could just maintain our loyalty to a cryptocurrency. What sense does this make? It just doesn't make sense. Anyways, let me take a quick break before we get to the Ethereum news and the analysis. We'll be right back. All right, cool. So let's talk about Ethereum now. All the fuss which has been made recently. This is from Lefteris Karapetsas, I think is your name, German bro, Volk guy. He says, question for Lido Finance, Coinbase, Kraken, and these other guys. If regulators ask you to censor at the Ethereum protocol level with your validators, will you A, comply and censor at the protocol level, or will you B, shut down the staking service and preserve network integrity? And what he's referencing here is a tweet by somebody who had put some data together, and he saw that currently it looks like over 66% of the Beacon Chain validators will adhere to OFAC regulations. It's quite a number of them, right? It's quite a number. It's well over 51%. Looks like they're going to be able to censor transactions. And so I said that if one of those exchanges shuts down their staking service, then another exchange will profit by earning the customers that want to get that service, and the exchanges are going to eat up that market share. It will be a fiduciary responsibility to be compliant and censor the transactions. And I said, come on, let's be real. We know this is going. Now, he responded, and he said those that censor are going to have their entire staking deposit slashed through a UASF. So they're going to get the opposite of profit. But there's a lot that's implicated in that statement. Are there not? So let's read for you guys what he means by this. So he links something from the Ethereum proof of stake website, and it says this. It says, in the proof of stake case, things are much brighter. And they're talking about 51% attacks and things like this. He says, the website says, for certain kinds of 51% attacks, particularly reverting finalized blocks, there is a built-in slashing mechanism in the proof of stake consensus by which a large portion of the attacker's stake and no one else's stake can get automatically destroyed. Okay. It goes on to say, for other harder to detect attacks, notice how it says harder to detect, which means judgments could be incorrect. It says, notably, a 51% coalition censoring everyone else, the community can coordinate on a minority user-activated soft fork in which the attacker's funds are once again largely destroyed. In Ethereum, this is done via the inactivity leak mechanism. I don't know what that is. I'm not an expert on this stuff. This is to some degree over my head, but I'm going to give you the best analysis I can. It says no explicit hard fork to delete coins is required, with the exception of the requirement to coordinate on the UASF to select a minority block. Everything else is automated and simply following the execution of the protocol rules. So this minority group can decide what block that they want to create a fork on, and they can bleed out essentially through this slashing mechanism those who they determine to be censoring transactions. So again, if you're just like a normal guy and you don't want to end up like the Tornado Cash Bro, and so you don't want to validate or put your signature on transactions which are coming from like North Korea, this guy and his cadre of people in the Ethereum community could look at you and say, we're going to bleed you out. We're going to destroy, as it says here, your stake. So, I mean, this is a problem, is it not? I mean, I love how he presents this as being such an easy solution to this problem. But also worth remembering is that this isn't just going to be like the equity of Coinbase or of Kraken or whoever. I mean, these are depositor funds. Essentially, you're going to have a lot of people who stake on the exchanges because they're going to get a profit from doing that. They're going to be able to pretty much outsource the validation service to the exchanges. Meanwhile, they get, some interest payment in a way for allowing the exchange to do that. And a lot of people are going to opt to do this. And businesses are probably going to opt to do this, businesses that have a lot of Ethereum. And, because they've got other things to do. What happens if this guy and others in the community who are like hardcore anti-censorship bros slash your stake and you lose tremendous amounts of money? That's going to be bad for Ethereum, is it not? Because a lot of people are then going to look at it and they're going to be like, I don't want to use this anymore. I just had my money stolen. Also to consider, what are the legal implications of this? Because if you and your fork bros decide that you're going to do this, what if they know who you are? And what if you slash the stake of the wrong people? Okay, because if you're slashing the stake of some big names out there who are connected to the regulatory system and, by the way, are just complying with the law, then how do you know the government's not going to go after you? How do you know you aren't going to be considered some kind of like financial terrorista for destroying the capital of these entities, which are in the good graces of the government because they're doing the government's bidding by doing the censorship? Do you realize who you're going up against? I mean, how do you, and what's going to happen with this Ethereum fork? Because if you are making the statement that there will be no censorship, how do you know it's not going to be banned? How do you know there's not going to be a regulatory crackdown on Ethereum? Are exchanges going to allow Ethereum on their exchange? Things to consider, right? And I don't have the answers to these questions. I'm speculating with you guys because this is something that I'm not totally familiar with, but I'm just thinking out loud. Let me know what you guys think. This sounds like it would create a significant number of issues. Now, we all know these issues could be avoided if Ethereum had privacy on the base layer, but it doesn't, and so they're dealing with this crap. But seriously, what could be the collateral damage of such an activity or the soft fork, right? So I asked him from a source, and this bro, Gone Bat Fire, he says, if 1/3 of stakers soft fork, Chain B will also only have 1/3 of the market cap, right? Then the attacker has to buy 51% of Chain B, but now that costs 25% of the original chain stake. If the minority of B forks again, then the cost of attack keeps getting lower, according to him. And again, I'm not saying he's right. I don't know. These are just ideas I'm getting out there. And he says, as per the fork, it's not like the funds in the original chain become worth zero as the other 2/3 of the market cap remains there, according to him. Now, I'm not saying he's an Ethereum expert, but this is a conversation which is being had. There's a lot of uncertainty about this. And if you decide to do one of these forks, who knows what the ramifications are going to be? There's going to be a lot of uncertainty. There's probably going to be a big sell-off. And this kind of plays into what we talked about with Arctic Mine. He said one of the big Achilles heels of Ethereum, going to proof of stake or just proof of stake systems in general, is that if you get an entity or a federation of entities that have a significant influence over the blockchain because they become significant validator powers. Well, what's to stop them from shorting the proof of stake crypto and then causing a problem that would encourage people to maybe do one of these soft forks, which again, as we just mentioned, creates a lot of uncertainty, which will probably create FUD in the environment, cause people to sell, institutions become shaky about the legality that they've just been forced into, like the legal environment. Like, what do we do? What's the precedent for this? Maybe we shouldn't deal with this stuff. Maybe we start to cross some red lines. Let's sell. The people who shorted the Ethereum network, they could be making more money, especially if they're levered up, than the money that they had in the system, right? Something to consider. Something to consider. But I'm just thinking out loud with you guys. I'm not an expert on this. But is my thinking unreasonable? Just things to consider. Let me know what you think. All right, so I found this bro, Ari Paul, and I actually looked into him a little bit more as I was making another clip. I had to take a moment to think about some of the things that he had said, but check this out. He makes many good points that I think we in the Monero community have been on top of for a while, and you guys know I've talked about OFAC censorship of Bitcoin mining for a little bit here on the channel, but this has been a topic of conversation for years now in the Monero community, and it's now, I think, going more mainstream as we're seeing OFAC compliance and censorship make its way into the Ethereum community and their conversations. Ari Paul makes some good points here about this in relation to Bitcoin. He says, this same exact issue applies to Bitcoin. Many miners are already censoring. And we did see with Marathon Mining, they started to censor a little bit in their pool. They stopped that about a year ago, though, but the precedent was set for Bitcoin OFAC mining compliance. And I think we're going to see more of that. I'm seeing articles now where Iran is evading sanctions, selling oil for cryptocurrency. And it wasn't specified which cryptocurrency they used, but I think that's going to bring us closer to OFAC mining pools. And I think what we're seeing over in Russia, as they're becoming more of a pariah state, maybe they start to use crypto more. We know that they're mining Bitcoin. We know that they now have a regulatory framework for crypto, and they've talked about taking cryptocurrency for oil and gas payments as well. So if that starts to happen, there's going to be every legal incentive to make OFAC mining pools, and censorship is going to become a real problem, or at least a real topic of conversation. As we saw in the prior video, the United States has about 38% of the hash rate for the Bitcoin mining network. Okay, so that is an issue. That is an issue. And as Jiraj Bednar points out, he was the person who actually got me tuned into this issue. He said that you don't even need 50% of the miners to be censoring or getting involved with linking their pools to OFAC blacklist. It could just be 10%. And he has a whole analysis on that right here. I linked it here. Go check it out. He goes deep. But he also has an interview with Doug on Monero Talk where he goes into it. It's pretty interesting. But Ari says, what happens if 50% start only building on top of OFAC compliant blocks? Social consensus is the only backstop there, too. But he has another thread here that I want to read, and I want to take a moment to check this out. But we're going to read this thread by Ari Paul. Just have to check it out first. But he says, have seen a weird amount of disinformation around how Bitcoin mining works recently, coming from two angles. First, people concerned about Treasury Department censorship scaling up and hoping Bitcoin is immune and looking to rationalize that and looking to beat up on proof of stake. He says here, first, the censorship/centralization concerns around proof of stake are real and concerning. I'm not dismissing these criticisms. It looks like a few entities like Coinbase and Lida may control majority of the staking power and may have incentives to censor the protocol. So that's interesting. He's saying it right there. I'm not arguing that Ethereum or proof of stake are equal to or more decentralized or censorship resistant than Bitcoin. My argument is Bitcoin is in scary shape when it comes to censorship, and I hope we address it because I want Bitcoin to be cypherpunk, not the current status path. I'm not writing anything new here. Everything that follows was basically consensus, or at least a popular logical line among the Bitcoiners who participated in proof of work game theory discussions 2010 to 2016. So interesting. This has been a topic of conversation. I was not aware of this, frankly. I mean, certainly that had to have been considered. I actually think Andreas Antonopoulos had actually commented on this in a video a number of years back. So he was concerned about the risk. But I think a lot of the people who were involved in Bitcoin going back to this era have been scalped, and they've moved over to Monero. But I still think a lot of them are in Bitcoin, and I think maybe they're just excited about the institutional adoption. They don't really want to rattle too many feathers. That could also be something else which is going on. He says, first, a quick tangent. There's two general modes of thinking, empirical and logical. Yeah, we don't need to get into the basics of philosophy. We've never yet had governments demand protocol level censorship and try to punish non-compliance. DeFi was censored in 2017 and 2020. That wasn't proof that it couldn't be censored. Similarly, proof of work mining hasn't historically been censored, but it'd be a similar fallacy to claim that proves it can't/won't. On to Bitcoin mining first. Quote-unquote censorship at the block level, i.e. a miner choosing to exclude a transaction from a block they mine, happens in literally every block. Bitcoin doesn't know or care why miners choose to exclude a transaction. Insufficient fee, OFAC blacklist, but no, that doesn't produce a censored blockchain, since even if 99% of the miners refuse to include your transaction, sooner or later that last 1% of miner will mine a block and will include yours if you pay enough of a fee. So how does individual miner censorship produce a censored blockchain? To oversimplify, this happens when miners decide to only build on top of censored blocks. Why and when would miners decide to do this? For an economically motivated miner, a horrible outcome is to mine a block or chain that gets orphaned or reorganized, such that they lose their mining rewards. That's their first priority, especially if you're a business. If you're a business, you have fiduciary responsibilities to your shareholders, which means, A, you got to follow the law, but 2, you got to do whatever maximizes your profits, right? And this is just natural amongst people in crypto. People in crypto, for the most part, care about the money. They're not revolutionaries. I mean, we're all quite honest and frank about that, aren't we, at this point in 2022? So, yeah, he's onto something here. That's their first priority. What if 50% plus of the miners are being forced to censor by their governments? He says, suddenly, there's a new incentive to orphan any uncensored blocks, even just for purely economic reasons. Why allow your less regulated competitors to capture that fee income? Mining is close to a zero-sum game, and many miners are ruthless, or at least rationally competitive. And that's why we've talked about how there's going to be permitting for Bitcoin mining at some point. Because of all this environmental ESG stuff, the big miners, because they have the ability to scale and mine Bitcoin in an environmentally friendly way, they're going to lobby the government to introduce environmental regs to Bitcoin mining, which is going to price out a lot of their competitors and the smaller miner. So we do see that coming. We anticipate that. Moving forward, he says, of course, regulators may encourage/force those miners in their borders to do this. But I'm pointing out that even without coercion, rational miners are likely to do this regardless. I don't know what HF means. Nodes don't care or know why transactions are censored, and they can't distinguish low fees from real censorship. That's interesting. This might produce block reorganizations if the minority chain keeps trying to include censored transactions, but as a node operator, it's not like you get to choose between two competing chains. You'd only see one chain at any point in time with Nakamoto consensus. This is all very interesting. Lastly, I'll end with practical. Does anyone really think that publicly listed miners in Europe and the US haven't implemented OFAC screens? That more won't over the next 3 and 12 months. We don't have to wait for this to play out to see the obvious. Call any of them up. So he's saying a lot of these big miners are already doing OFAC screens on their transactions. He's saying censorship is already happening on Bitcoin. Now, I don't know if this is happening. He says to call them up. Very well could be. Maybe they haven't made it public. Maybe it's just they have opted in to doing this. A lot of these miners, they weren't actually forced to do this. They weren't, nobody was arrested at first to then scare everybody else into doing it. They just did it voluntarily. That could be what has happened, according to him. I don't know. But OFAC censorship is definitely coming. Absolutely. A final addendum. Some are hoping that mining pools will shield Bitcoin miners from this enforcement. Maybe. If the Tornado Cash sanctions stand, same could apply to pools. So we're getting to that point. He says we're kind of betting on that getting overturned for Bitcoin not to be censored with this take. In my opinion, there's one solution that isn't relying on social consensus or friendly regulators for both Bitcoin and Ethereum: shielded transactions. Everyone's saying we don't need that or should wait a decade to add that, are knowingly or not supporting an effort to make these state friendly. Yeah, so he just confirmed what all of us in the Monero community have been saying forever. You have to have censorship on the base layer, or you're going to have censorship. Did I say censorship on the base layer? You have to have privacy on the base layer, or else you're going to have censorship. It's obvious. It's 2 + 2, right? Of course. Whether it's censorship on the blockchain or censorship in the physical space where people with guns can come after you. Okay, so yeah, I think that's a great thread. I agree with what he says completely here. So thank you, Ari, for that information. This is another thread by Miles Suter. He says, way too many Bitcoiners are not paying attention to the two serious crises playing out in Ethereum just weeks away from the merge. Both have implications for the future of Bitcoin. Instead of saying we told you so or ignoring what's going on, let's go through both individually. He says Ethereum miners are continuously preserving the proof of work chain. Because DeFi and stables are integral to Ethereum's value proposition, issuers like USDC essentially select which chain wins and which chain collapses. Scary that future forks live or die based on US companies. Right. It's very fascinating. Fallout from the tornado sanctioning and the realization that 70% or so of validators are US-based. Regulated custodians have to comply with OFAC. And if they were in Europe, if they were in other parts of the world, they'd probably have to comply with FATF. Because OFAC, FATF, join at the hip, basically. This introduces the real possibility of base layer protocol censorship being introduced on Ethereum. I legit can't believe, now this is hilarious. Okay. He says, I legit can't believe there wasn't a real plan for either situation, and they weren't actively anticipated. Well, I think they were. I think they absolutely were. As we told you guys, ESG isn't just about environmental concerns. That's like the big, that's the face of it. But really, it's about the social and governmental elements. That's what's really important to the people in power. It's governance. And the ESG phenomenon, not just in crypto, but in every other area of the economy with this green revolution stuff, it's all about control. It's all about control. It's communism, basically. It's like the whole watermelon thing. It's like green on the outside, red on the inside. What they want to do is get full control by encouraging people to think that untethered human action that isn't curtailed is going to destroy the planet. Therefore, tyranny is necessary. That's the logic. And so they were able to finagle these ETH bros. And I've actually seen some Ethereum developers come out and say proof of work should be illegal because of how much environmental damage it has, right? So we're going to see the lobbying come in. We're going to see probably the ETH bros and other proof of stake fans lobby the government to ban proof of work systems. Probably. I mean, it could be. Now, there was an initiative in Europe for that to happen. It got overturned for now. But just like with the unrealized capital gain stuff, there's going to be another try, in my opinion. Because proof of work, it's harder to control. It's much harder to control, especially if you're talking about Monero. I mean, Monero's proof of work, But it's much more censorship resistant than even Bitcoin because we don't use ASICs rigs, which, kind of bottlenecked amongst a few manufacturers and also stealth addresses and everything like that. It's much more decentralized. By the way, we also have the peer-to-peer mining pool, which I think is up to 10% of the hash rate now because MineXMR, they stopped. A lot of that hash rate was distributed to other pools. They supported peer-to-peer pool. More people are using the peer-to-peer pool now. So mining is very decentralized with Monero because all you need is a laptop, and you're mining the stuff and you're mining it privately. So that's something to note. But the powers that be, if they can't control something, as we've said, they're going to try to crack down on it. And if there's a financial incentive now for them to do that, because Ethereum is now proof of stake, they can censor Ethereum. I think Ethereum could flip Bitcoin. It's very possible if they get away with taking the reins of Ethereum, because they've already convinced a lot of the population that crypto is going to lead to more freedom. It's going to lead to more gains. It's going to lead to a better world. Blah blah blah. Like this is kind of like the psyop, but they can take control of Ethereum. Why would they want people to use Bitcoin? Unless they can get people on board to the Lightning Network, where everything is centralized, everything's run by basically Blockstream and the World Economic Forum bros, who are behind the scenes financing a lot of the main centralized hubs where a lot of the value is going to be passing through. Well, they'll be okay with that at that point, maybe. But again, the base case is if they don't control it, then they're not going to like it. They're going to try to push it to the sidelines, right? But it's interesting that he says there wasn't a real plan. I think there was a plan. I think there absolutely was a plan. I think it's hilarious. And if there wasn't a plan, then the Ethereum bros are getting exactly what they deserve. It's the pride goeth before the fall, right? You thought you could just take out Klaus Schwab, and you thought you could just overrule the powers that be who have been in charge for centuries, the families anyway, by just coming up with some cute technology and then just like, hey, everyone use this technology. We're free now. Like, no. That's naive. You understand, right? It was never going to be that easy. Never going to be that easy. Like, so now they're having this awakening moment. They're like, oh my gosh, maybe we've been finagled. Maybe you did. Maybe you were finagled, bro. But this is why I love the Monero community, particularly is because they're not naive about these things. I mean, if you go into the Monero Reddit, like every week, there's a thread for people who are like, okay, are there holes in our theory? What can we improve upon? What is it that we're missing here? And I just don't feel like you have that with other communities, especially because there's just a natural distrust of the government and the powers that be in the Monero community. I mean, I think none of us are naive about really kind of who's in charge and what their plans are for us and what the end goal is. So I think the Monero community particularly is solidified. And the fact that the price really hasn't gone anywhere, we haven't had too many people take attention away from what's really important in this community. Like most people in this community are focused on the freedom element and are focused on the parallel economies and the things that are really important, right? That's one thing that you actually do benefit from when it comes to not having a lot of price appreciation. But yeah, just some comments. I mean, we could get very conspiratorial, but moving on, he says, while separate and concurrent issues, their overlap actually points toward a worst-case scenario world, which we should be prepared for. I ask these questions to reduce any future possibility of Bitcoin capture and to highlight important differences between proof of stake and proof of work. Issue 1 eliminates the viability of any potential fork for the network. If entities beholden to regulators now play kingmaker on which chain lives, that's permissioned. The proof of work fork is annoying, but the real concern is being forced to become OFAC chain. Right, just more people coming to their senses here. He says issue 2 shows how proof of stake, as it currently stands, has a majority of stake that's subject to complying with blacklists. having the validity of certain types of transactions dictated by the regulatory regimes, hardly a quote-unquote unstoppable world computer. And he says U.S.-based staking services, Coinbase, etc., seem to have three options: censor and their own blocks, but sign all others; don't censor their blocks, sign all others, or disband. They're probably not going to disband because it's a service that they'd like to provide. Right? And I'm sure the people who invested in them, who have very close relationships with the government and the power structures, are going to want them to do that too. I mean, look at who's invested in Coinbase: Digital Currency Group, MasterCard, all the global leases, right? So, I mean, it's a cesspit of legacy money that's involved with Coinbase. You'll find a lot of banks. You'll find a lot of names that you recognize from Wall Street, right? So, while not a single Wall Street person was jailed when massive fraud collapsed in our economy in 2008, and HSBC just gets fined for laundering cartel money, OFAC violations explicitly state that officers at the company could serve jail time for noncompliance. Right. Sanctions are only going to increase. Correct. Due to its design, proof of stake makes sanctions poisonous for all parties involved. It's obviously the case. Proof of work is clearly fundamentally different. Well, we were just pointing out how there's still problems with that. With the other gentleman, conflating the two is intellectually dishonest, but no doubt they will try. I really don't see any self-contradictory option for these U.S. regulated staking services outside of shutting down. OFAC deciding not to come to, blah, 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 blah. Wishful optimism, he says. The community is preparing to potentially not even risk it and instead fork off all of the regulated staking services. Good luck. I mean, to me, I feel like there are issues with that. Right? I feel like there are issues with that. Which brings us back to issue 1 and the danger of USDC Circle Tether being able to dictate which chain is valid. It dictates where this massive amount of USD tokens actually resides. The chain retains redeemability, has massive impact on which survives. Most recent replies from Bitcoiners have recently missed the point, lacking substantial context here. We should pay attention instead of indulging in surface-level schadenfreude. I mean, we love schadenfreude a little bit. I mean, can't we enjoy ourselves with schadenfreude a little bit? Some takeaways, blah, 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 blah. I don't really want to get to all that stuff. Dun, 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 dun. What is going on with my trending here? We've got butts on this one, and we've got blackface over here, and then BitBoy. Like, what's going on with Twitter? Question for the Ethereum community. Yeah, I mean, we've spoken at length about this. I don't think we need to really delve too much into this, but yeah, here's Lynn Alden. She's saying need to be aware of potential attacks on Bitcoin coin joins or other privacy tools, potential OFAC impact on U.S. miners. Some stable coins depend on Bitcoin, and probably more will over time. I consider this less of a threat for Bitcoin than Ethereum, but it's always worth analyzing. So, pretty interesting. Imagine the politics that would be played on whether Ethereum protocol and community should slash Binance or Coinbase, impacting millions of customers for obeying OFAC and censoring Ethereum transactions. How is this an improvement on fiat currency systems today? Answer, it's not. Yeah, but that's interesting. It was promised to be so. Broken promises, in my opinion, right? And this is pretty interesting. Namcios, he finds a tweet from Vitalik going back to 2017. He says, just saving this is going to be hella relevant in the upcoming months and years. The idea of average users personally validating the entire history of the system, according to Vitalik, is a weird mountain man fantasy. There, I said it. Okay, I mean, so I think he has an idea of where this is going, right? Vitalik seems to be in on this. Or he just seems to not have the same position. Maybe he does. I don't know. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? Let's move on. So Kurt is pointing out here how it could be that the gas fees aren't going to go down with Ethereum 2.0, because there is a comment here, and again, I want to let you know. I want to know what you guys think about this. He says gas fees are a product of network demand relative to the network's capacity. The merge deprecates the use of proof of work, transitioning to proof of stake for consensus, but does not significantly change any parameters that directly influence network capacity or throughput. And then this bro named Rob, he says, real background story. One of their lead engineers told me if the fees get too low, insufficient Ethereum gets burned to increase the price, parentheses, by reducing supply. So it could just be another number go up thing. Let me know what you guys think. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. So let's get to the digital currency group. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. All right. Now let's move on to the digital currency group. This is basically a nexus of participants from the legacy financial system who are looking to influence the direction of crypto. They're involved with hundreds of cryptocurrency projects, ranging from regulation to exchanges to even the Lightning Network, Coinbase also. So I want to show you just how many exchanges they have stake in. Because it's not just going to be the digital currency group. It's going to be other institutional investors too who are going to have a lot of stake in these exchanges. And if most people are going to be putting their Ethereum onto exchanges in order to stake, then what I see coming is an incentive to have people keep their crypto on the exchanges. Now, we've already seen this in Europe with the crackdown on self-hosted wallets. I anticipate that to expand. The United States is probably going to make an initiative for that. But there's going to be an incentive to encourage people to keep their crypto on the exchanges, to encourage compliance. Maybe you get interest payments from the exchanges, or you get some other benefit. Or maybe you're just not allowed to. Maybe there's a regulation that's deterring you from taking your crypto off the exchanges, lest you have to report and do all this other stuff. But I want to show you just how many exchanges the digital currency group is involved in, because it's quite interesting. So let's go down to sector. Yeah, they're involved in blockchain registries. By the way, they're in charge of Grayscale Trust and the CoinDesk, one of the biggest crypto news sources out there, run by pretty much the legacy financial system. Exchanges. Okay, so you've got the Bitcoin Derivatives Exchange in Chicago, CoinFlex in China, FTX they're invested in, which is interesting. Luno, which is based in Singapore. And it's interesting to me that these are the only four that they have listed in exchanges. But if you go down this is also interesting, identity and compliance. This is their biggest sector, is identity and compliance, blockchain security and intelligence, revolutionary KYC for blockchain, analytics for blockchain protocols, identity for a mobile world, right? So you see where they're invested in: identity verification, due diligence, compliance layer, chain analysis, right? So that's where they're putting their money. And so all these people who are like, we have to stop KYC, we can still do it. Okay, good luck. But just know there's a lot of money and a lot of momentum moving towards that. And we've talked about all of the incentive structures which are being put in place for that. And I think it's pretty much inevitable at this point. But, give it a shot. Internationals. Now, they have so many other exchanges here, which is interesting that they didn't put it under the exchange section. But here they've got an exchange in Japan, an exchange in Dubai, blockchain banking in Germany, Bitso, a Mexican Bitcoin exchange, South America, more blockchain intelligence. Okay, I mean, are you guys seeing that they have a worldwide investment stake in exchanges? Digital asset exchange in Switzerland. India's leading Bitcoin company in India. Okay, so they own exchanges in blockchain banks all over the world. So it's going to be these guys who are going to be determining what's going on with the Ethereum that people have staked on all these exchanges all over the world, right? It's going to be a few select entities. So that's just something I wanted to point out to you, which I thought was pretty interesting. Let's move forward. This guy says, checkmate. In one move, the U.S. government has demonstrated that they own Ethereum. Folks, do us all a favor, ditch the move to proof of stake so you don't hand consensus to them as well. Yeah, so. More cope. Fun fact, Google has invested $1.56 billion into blockchain companies between September 2021 and June 2022. Okay, so that's pretty interesting, right? A lot of people anticipate that what this news means is you have the capitulation by the institutional investors to the freedom technologies. The technocracy is rolling over to Bitcoin, into the crypto revolution. That's what a lot of people interpret this as. But I'm sure you guys understand that that's naive. And it's that pride and it's that hubris which has led people to be in the position that they're in the Ethereum community, where they're like, oh my gosh, how come we didn't see this coming? This was out in the open. And we're just making this move and we're going to be captured by their surveillance state and we're going to have to censor. Like, why didn't we think about this before? Well, it's because you thought it was going to be an easy win. Okay? And you thought you were just going to be, fists on the hips, walking around big dogs. No, it's, you got wrecked. Or we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I'm rooting for you guys, but that's why we kind of took the rearguard action in Monero. So this tweet is from a suspended account. Oh, I guess Crypto Whale got suspended. Interesting. That is interesting. He made a tweet about Bitcoin miners losing billions of dollars, how that's going to lead to more centralization, I think, of the Bitcoin mining industry. You're probably going to have BlackRock buy up these shares on the cheap. And we went into that in the last video, talking about the centralization of Bitcoin mining. I don't know if I really want to get to all this, although I pulled it up. But, largest Bitcoin miners lost over $1 billion during the crypto crash. They're selling a lot of their ASICs rigs. They're trying to get financing from the likes of Genesis, who, by the way, who's Genesis? Well, that's the digital currency group. It's basically one of their subsidiaries. So, digital currency group looking to get more exposure to the miners. And, if they're creditors, that means they have the first dibs on the assets should they fail in the operation. So, they're stepping up to the plate. Also, BlackRock is getting involved. Silvergate Capital has been buying shares in Bitcoin mining, which is interesting. And Silvergate Capital is a crypto-friendly bank. But who owns them? Well, Vanguard Group, BlackRock, State Street Corp, Morgan Stanley, etc. The typical suspects. BlackRock owns 7.18%. Vanguard owns 9.2%. So, pretty interesting, right? But at the end, this thing, man. Moving on. I'm just kind of like bust through this because all the stuff you guys probably already know. At least if you watch this channel. let's do an update on the tax situation. We've been telling you forever they're going to do a crackdown on crypto bros. More people are starting to realize this. DB at tier 10K, they say DB court authorizes IRS to serve John Doe summons on SFOX, seeking information on U.S. taxpayers who conducted at least 20K in crypto transactions between 2016 and 2021. Okay, so just 20K. And that's money going back and forth, money just going through SFOX, which I presume is an exchange. And they could be doing this with many, many other exchanges with those 87,000 new IRS agents and the $80 billion. I actually have somebody who's a family member who works at the IRS. Believe it or not, they're an attorney who defends them. Quite something, but he's a good guy, good dude. But he had told someone else in my family, so this is some inside info, they don't even know what to do with the $80 billion. And, well, I don't want to say too much about him, but let's just say he's one of the people who's going to be, well, I don't want to say, and give him out, but yeah, they don't know what to do with all that money. So they're going to be investing it in a lot of things, which is going to help them get a return on investment. Elizabeth Warren, what did she say about crypto, people, and the audits thereof? Well, she said that the biggest return on investment when it comes to audits is on crypto bros. It's like a 5-to-1 return. So they're going to go after the crypto bros, and if you transacted at least just 20K on these exchanges, well, they're going to come after you. And everything you do on a blockchain can and will be used against you, blah, blah, blah. By the way, Havano, I think, is doing okay. I think they actually have a test case up if you want to test out Havana, which is the private decentralized peer-to-peer exchange, which is based on Monero. And I think that's going to get a lot of liquidity, especially if we start to see more things like this. Again, pay your taxes, don't evade taxes, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of people are going to look at this and they're going to be like, whoa, I want to get off these centralized exchanges. Where can I go trade privately and in a decentralized way? Well, you can do it on Havana. And because you have Monero being traded there, you can trade all the crypto you want, settle in Monero basically, and then take your gains and profits off that exchange. So that's pretty interesting. And you're also going to be able to buy Monero for cash, although that's going to be a little bit more dubious because you're going to have to use like money orders and things like that. Maybe meet them in person, kind of like a local Monero thing. But more tax news. Colombia's tax authority head says they plan to launch a digital currency, a CBDC, to prevent tax evasion. Right. And you know what's going to come next. When they launch the CBDC or they get close, they're going to crack down on non-CBDC cryptos. It's just predictable, right? Moving on, new regulatory changes in Canada. These crazy bros, you are allowed to buy as much BTC, ETH, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash as you want, but any other crypto has a limit of 30K net buy per year. Bruh. Okay, so it's just predictable. What's going to happen? People are going to buy a lot of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, and Bitcoin Cash. They're going to flip that into Monero or another private cryptocurrency, and then they're going to take Monero and then go to somewhere else where they get, Bitcoin, maybe, and then they buy all the cryptos that they want because they've washed out, right? So that's pretty predictable, especially if they continue to crack down on the layer 2 solutions. Sticking out loud with you guys. Again, don't do anything illegal, but let's get to positive Monero news. This psychs me up. This is from A Fungible. Go give him a follow. He says, Monero momentarily reached block size of 310 kilobytes a day before triggering dynamic block size algorithm for the very first time. So we saw dynamic block size in action. It's triggered for the very first time, which is very exciting. Clearing pending transactions in no time. Note the average block size has been around 78K. Shows Monero scales well. Great stress test for the network. Lovely. That is awesome. Monero has upgraded its decoy size from 11 to 16. And in a couple years, should everything go right, Seraphis is going to upgrade to bring the ring size to 128. which means privacy is just going to go nuclear. It's going to be pretty much impossible to track at that point. Monero usage hitting constant all-time highs. Man, I'm getting tired. It's like 11:30. And it's awesome. Everything is awesome. Moving on. Dun, 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 dun. 8 months later. Yeah, so check it out. This was Grampy. Check out the dots. These are all the Monero nodes on the map. 8 months later, you have the amount of nodes exploding. Look at that. So people setting Monero nodes up everywhere. Adoption booming. It's fantastic. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Let's just end the talk here, going into Atlantic Council's digital currency tracker, the CBDC tracker. This map is consistently getting greener, and you have us moving ever more close to the launch of CBDCs just about everywhere. And I remember looking at this map, I think it was like a year ago when we started to look at this thing. But yeah, this thing has definitely developed a lot because Russia in the pilot stage of CBDC, same with Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, China. I mean, they basically have launched it as far as I understand. It's just adoption, which is a problem. Sweden now on their way. Ukraine, interestingly enough, working with Stellar Development Foundation to launch their CBDC. South Africa is in the pilot stages. And Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, all rapidly moving towards the CBDC. It's really quite something. South Korea also in the pilot stage of CBDC. Apparently, they're going to be using Ethereum. Good luck. Very interesting. Very interesting. And in development, we have so many more countries. I won't go through them all. But needless to say, we're getting closer. And as we've said for a long time, as we get closer to the rollout of CBDC, you're going to get a crackdown concomitantly on non-CBDC crypto that they don't control. They don't want money moving out of the system. They want to keep all the money that they can in the system, especially as we move towards price controls, shortages, rationing, etc. Increases in tax, austerity. As we saw in Israel, they're cracking down on people's capacity to use cash. If you engage in cash transactions over a certain amount, you got to pay a big fine. So they're disincentivizing the use of cash everywhere. They want to keep everybody in the system, which is why we think it's a good idea to get off the system with private cash. Monero. I think cash, just regular cash, still a good idea. Gold and silver, no-brainer, of course. But it's late. I think that's it, folks. I think that's it. Fun video, right? Not many jokes. Just kind of going through some hard data here. Just kind of putting this stuff together. But, hey, cool. Super hot mega bullish case coming along. Everything moving forward as we anticipated. So, yeah. And I have a private super chat that I want to do. Thank you all for the donations. Again, if you guys send me a donation, you can send me an email on Proton Chain, Proton Mail, whatever, Proton Mail. And I'll read it. If it's a comment, if it's a question, I'll answer. So let's get to that now. This is from, he calls himself Jim Bob Landscaper, bro. Someone that we mentioned in the last video talking about something else. But he says, let's see here. Oh, man. It's a long email. But, so he says here, your statements on minute 16, 70 seconds. This is for the last video, by the way. He says, weakness in this world, you always needed a strong community and faith, especially as a Christian. That's why we need to have decentralized solutions and not offer our enemies a central point of failure or weakness in the passivism of some hippies, since we are all sinners more or less as well as animals. I wouldn't say we're animals necessarily, but I get your sentiment. technically we're animals, blah, 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 but in the Christian sense, right? Regarding your monarch talks, we have talked about monarchy a little bit, and my position is becoming ever more solidified. I'm pretty monarchical. I think it's a good position. I used to be a libertarian, but I've kind of phased away from that. Too unlikely for a lot of reasons I don't want to get into here. It's just not practical. You run into persuasion problems. A lot of it has to do with the failure of secular moral philosophy. And to try to build a system based on secular moral philosophy is in and of itself problematic. I just don't think that they're sustainable. Your value system is not going to be such that people are oriented towards the same direction. They're not going to be able to control their passion sufficiently enough for somebody to, dangle some kind of dopamine-laden carrot in front of them to give up that which is important and necessary to maintain those freedoms. And I think that's, in many cases, what we're seeing in this society, where because we've lost faith, because we've lost our capacity to delay gratification in the promise of an afterlife, etc., we're just that much more susceptible to being enslaved to our passions and then being enslaved to people who are able to enslave us by just getting control of that which inflames our passions, if that makes sense. So that's the main problem I have with libertarianism. It just doesn't seem practical. People want to tell me all the moral arguments for it. That's fine, but there's a reason why libertarian societies just haven't been prominent in the past. And that's just because there has to be a problem with the theory if it's not really taking place in practice. If you don't offer up, then you're going to offer out. And I imagine most libertarian societies, we haven't heard of them because they've been conquered. Okay, so it turns into you might as well just pay tribute up in a voluntary-esque type way so that you don't pay it out to some foreign invader, which I imagine you're going to be able to be invaded that much more easily if you are a libertarian society, because the main orient is money. And if you have companies which are protecting you for money, then maybe they can be sold out to foreign entities or foreign enemies that want to use those entities, then turn against you and then conquer you. We could go into an hour-long discussion about all this stuff, but yeah, monarchy, there's some good ideas there, but ultimately what determines the health of a society is what they do liturgically. That's another revelation that I've had recently. It's not even so much the politics and the political formations or what technologies they have or whatever. It's more of what they do liturgically and what they have faith in. I think one of the more revealing things about what we've seen here in the 21st century is how the Taliban essentially defeated the United States. And before them, they defeated the Soviets. I mean, they've been able to stick around for quite a long time, fending off some of the most powerful enemies or entities, countries which have ever existed, right? So the fact that they've been able to stand strong that long without technology, without a lot of money, just kind of shows you how powerful faith is, right? Because they're very strict and committed to their faith. Something to point out. But moving on, I still think you're right in terms of the conception. This is the dude who gave me the private super chat, the donation. I still think you're right in terms of conception of having strong leaders with good faith and spirit, which can help a lot. It's still a natural thing to suppress others in order to strengthen and increase your power and influence. Yeah, I mean, Jefferson is right. Liberty gives way to tyranny. It's just the natural course of things, blah, blah, blah. But if you need a central point of failure, empire is deemed to collapse at some point in history. Central point of failure. A monarch isn't necessarily a central point of failure. I wouldn't really say that because it's not. A monarch isn't just the king or the queen, it's the royal family. So the presumption is there's a family that's backing up the king or the queen. Now, you do run into that central point of failure, kind of like what you had in Soviet Russia during the Russian Revolution, where they just murdered the entire Romanov family. I mean, who was to take over at that point? There's nobody. And then Lenin took over, and then you had 100 years of just terrible chaos and bloodshed. But Yeah, you do run into that. I mean, to some degree, there's always going to be some level of central point of failure. But I'd have to think more about that. To be honest with you, I'd have to think more about that. I mean, just marvel at the fact that looking at Byzantine history, looking at Russian history, you've actually had a lot of political stability. The first monarchical dynasty in Russia lasted for about 600 years. And then you had the Romanov family after the Troubles, which had lasted for about 300 years. Seems pretty stable to me. And I keep hearing from people who are like, our democracy's lasted so long. Our form of government, it's so successful. It's lasted 200 years, 250 years. Okay, dynasties and monarchies have been around much longer than that. It's typically pretty stable. But you also need a stable culture and all that. You can't have a lot of subverters, infiltrators, and people like that screwing things up in your society. That's a problem. But moving on. Well, of course, then you have the issue with the liberals, and what they're facing nowadays is that they're too fragmented. You're unable to gain serious influence to strengthen basic stuff like freedom of speech or self-ownership in terms of your body, your choice about the jab, and that kind of stuff. Keep up the good work. I will include you in my prayers. Best regards, Jim Bob, Landscaper Bro. So thank you. Those are some good thoughts, my brother. And he also says people need to update their client not only for being able to interact with the network, but also to be safe against potential malicious nodes sending ridiculous information for fees. That's interesting. So look out for that, which then the user pays when he is not paying attention. Yeah, I have heard about that where some Monero bros are paying like a lot for transaction fees because there are these malicious nodes which are just slipping in really high transaction fees that people just don't notice. They send the transaction and they pay a lot. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to that. Well, thanks. Thank you, Jim Bob, Landscaper Bro. So that's it. First, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm going to bed. See ya. Good night. Monero Matteo. Like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. We'll be back with more analysis. And I hope that you guys have a wonderful night. God bless you. Bye-bye.